So do you have anything about yourself that makes other people think you're weird when they hear it? They're like, what? Really? Like, simple one, I don't like fruit. Like any fruit. Fruit is disgusting. It's gushy. It gushes. Like when you bite into it, it's watery and gushy. It's disgusting. And tomatoes are the worst. A tomato is basically a human organ on a green vine. It's a pancreas. You ever bite into one and watch what happens? Like the capillaries and tissue and cartilage spill out. Like you could transplant a tomato into somebody and it would probably take on some kind of function. It's like a human heart just sort of growing out of the earth. Boom. So I always ask, like, does anybody actually like tomatoes? And it seems like a cannibal. Hannibal Lecter would throw up eating a tomato. It'd be fine eating your face, but a tomato, and they literally are an organ. All fruit is an organ. It's an ovary. It's a matured plant ovary that swells up and contains seeds. So you're basically eating ovary whenever you're eating fruit, filled with little unborn tomato plants. Every tomato you eat is a mass abortion. Roe versus Farmer. Congratulations. You've murdered billions of tiny plants in your life. Strawberries are even worse. They're the actual seed, what everybody thinks is the little seed, little sticky things on the outside of strawberries, is the fruit. The strawberry itself is swollen receptacle tissue. That's what it's actually described. It's like the seeds will suck fluid down into the red strawberry part, and that's what expands. So you're eating receptacle tissue. I'd rather eat the eyes of a pig than a fruit. So if I've made them more disgusting to you, that's maybe my job, is to make vegans unable to eat fruit. Anybody unable to eat fruit? And if you look at the history of tomatoes especially, tomatoes are a fruit, okay? Scientifically, they are a fruit. They're a matured ovary, they have seeds, but legally, they're defined as a vegetable. This is the cool thing about American legal system. In the 1890s, there were tariffs on vegetables, not on fruits, I guess. And so to get around that, importers declared tomatoes to be fruit or vegetables. And the Supreme Court, after looking closely at it, was like, yeah, we'll just call them vegetables. No problem. So this tariff stuff and Supreme Court stupidity has been going on for quite a while. All right, so there you go. That's some opening rough draft stand-up of one of the red fruit areas that I wrote up this morning. Let's go back through it a little bit and I'll show you what I actually did. So I almost always start stand-up bits with questions because it creates mental connection. It activates the audience cognitively and gets everybody on the exact topic that you want to be talking about. And generally, stand-up does this a lot where it starts with a general premise that's human interest, that human beings find interesting, and then it hones down into a specific example. If you actually look at most stand-up, that's kind of what it's doing all the time. So I started this with, do you have anything about yourself that makes other people think you're weird? That's a general concept, a general premise. And there are lots of other examples of that you could see. Like, first of all, people always want to jump to something sexual, something odd about you, but you don't have to. Like, it can go anywhere. So you could write this bit over and over and over and over with different examples underneath that concept, that premise. And for me, like I said, it's fruit, which I'm not sure how, I need to look that up maybe as a piece of information, like how widespread is the hatred of fruit. It's definitely widespread with me. So I centered it in me because most stand-up, again, sort of comes back to the comic themselves. When they're doing stand-up, they're talking mostly about themselves. And I added an emotion that I think tomatoes are disgusting. So that was the second move. I'll bring a general concept, bring it down to me, add an emotion. And then I start going into the deep sort of tributaries within that topic. So one of my angles is that tomatoes are more like human organs than an actual plant or an actual food. And I did all sorts of stuff with it to reinforce that. Because I'm trying to make people feel disgust, but in a way that is so disgusting that it's funny. Calling it a pancreas, capillaries spilling out of it. It's like a human heart growing from the earth. All these are similes. They're comparisons. So I'm taking the human organ stuff, which is going to disgust people for sure, and then I'm adding it into a food that they commonly eat. I'm merging those two things in order to create a new effect. And I think I did. I think if you watch that, you're going to be more disgusted by tomatoes the next time you eat one. One of the things that I think is fun about stand-up is that if it's really good, it continues to exist in people's mind. Like you can take that process of eating a tomato and you can now be part of the mnemonic memory of that. Whenever somebody eats a tomato, they're going to remember your bit. And this happens a lot when you do good stand-up. Also, I'm trying to find something new. Like I don't think you've probably ever heard that tomato is described as human organs. It's a new thought, which is again what stand-ups are always trying to mine. If you come up with a new, unique, fresh thought, that's also something that will keep people interested in the topic. And then I went in and did some scientific research, which I guess I should have known. I don't know, should I have known this? But that fruit are sort of the organs of a plant. It's an ovary, which literally, again, you sort of start to import all the human stuff onto the plant. So you're doing this reverse anthropomorphization, I guess. Anthropomorphize. And then I made it a social issue. You're eating unborn plants. You're eating seeds. And we never put anything, abortion-wise on that. But that's a matured ovary. You're killing these seeds, and then you're spitting them out or passing them. Finally, I tried to make it even grosser by comparing it to I'd rather eat the eyes of a pig. And I could go more into that if I really wanted to. I veered out of it probably at the end. I'm not sure whether that stuff would work or I need to be separate about the legal issues. I didn't really have much punchline about that it's legally a vegetable. Although, you could go into other examples right there about the American legal system is arbitrary and basically changes things around for whoever has enough power to make it change. But that was kind of where I finished. Now, I talked about in the last video, there are a few others that I haven't really developed here yet, and I may before I finish. But cherries, I didn't do any more work on cherries. I did a little more research work on red bananas. First of all, because I think that's a fascinating change in color. Bananas are so yellow and so dominant in our culture as that's what everybody thinks. When you shift the color, it makes it an interesting shift, often a funny shift. And so I did a little more research there about the aphrodisiac properties. And that led into other aphrodisiacs. I remembered Spanish fly, so I looked that up because I'd heard that, but I didn't know what that actually meant. And it's a blister beetle, which has this little substance in it called, that I will never be able to pronounce, cantharidin. And they crush up the blister beetle and ingest that, and it's supposed to be an aphrodisiac. Spanish fly is actually illegal in most places, all places, because it's poisonous. And all it really does is irritate your urinary tract, which makes you feel like, I guess that's some kind of sexual sensation. But there's some interesting stuff about aphrodisiacs. And I looked up a little bit more about horny goat weed is another one that's used in a lot of places as an aphrodisiac. And it uses the same substance basically as Viagra, but in very, very tiny amounts. And supposedly it's literally called horny goat weed. The weed itself is called horny goat because apparently a shepherd, a goat herd, saw his goats eating a certain type of weed and then noticed that they were much more sexually active. They have it in Chinese medicine. It's used in different places around the world, but again, it's a very mild effect is apparently the problem, whereas Viagra intensifies it all. So that's essentially that's where I would be right now with that material before I would take it on stage. It's roughed in, there are punchlines in there, there are very strong sub-veers within the bit so that I know that if I'm gonna go up and talk about it, I'll start with the general premise about what about you makes people think you're weird. I don't like fruit, especially don't like tomatoes. Tomatoes are organs. Tomatoes, what was the last one? The last little sub-veer. All fruits are ovaries. And then somehow make it more disgusting with the eyes of the pig. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go up this weekend at the workshop and I will perform that. We'll see how long it is. It's probably 4 or 5 minutes. And I'll record it and we'll see sort of how it sounds on stage. Then at that point, I'll come back, do a rewrite. And eventually, who knows? You may never want to do something about tomatoes, but it's nice to have it. We talked about crowd work last week in the workshop, and a lot of that sometimes is if you have bits about just about everything, like you've worked a ton of different areas, you can always pull those up for different things, crowd work, or you can be funnier in conversations, I guess. So there you go. That's the third installment of writing about red fruit. We will see what the other workshoppers come in with. I don't know, like there's lots of different directions here. You can take it in many, many different ways. And even like with the red bananas, I'm not really talking about red bananas. I'm moving it over into using that as a lever to get over to aphrodisiacs, which are an easier topic. So bring stuff in, workshoppers. I'm able to record those too and throw some of those onto the channel so everybody can kind of see how this entire writing exercise leads to actual yield. And then again, like when I first did this on green vegetables years ago, I wrote it up and this pro comic who used it in his act for a long time and then used it on TV. So you never know where this stuff will grow. And that'd be an interesting, someday maybe somebody's on TV talking about discussing tomatoes or whatever it's going to be that they came up with. See you next time.